Welcome to CEC online lecture. Students, in today's session, I will talk about sales quotas. Let us first understand what are quotas. Quotas, or targets as they are generally known as, are the quantitative goals that you assign to a sales unit for a particular time period. The sales unit can be a salesperson or a territory. Now, based on this understanding of quotas, let us try to outline some of the characteristics of sales quotas. First, we can say that quotas, they provide the standards against which the performance of the sales representative can be evaluated, either in the physical terms or in terms of money. Secondly, we can also understand that another characteristic of sales quota is that they provide you with direction and control over the activities of the salespeople. The third characteristic is that as they are quantitative objectives that are assigned to individuals or to the territories or zones, therefore the quotas have a feature of helping the sales executives or the sales department as a whole to evaluate or judge the performance of each individual representative. Now, once we have understood this, students, let us move forward and understand the various objectives that are served by setting up of quotas. So, as I have mentioned that quotas are used to evaluate the performance because they serve as the standards against which the performance can be examined. The first and the foremost objective of the quota can be termed as the objective of indicating the strong or the weak spots in the selling structure. So when you establish the quotas for each territory or salesman, the management can get to know the strength of each of the territory or the strength of each of the individual. Now, what kind of input the management is going to get from this exercise? They would get to know whether there is any requirement to develop a particular territory on the basis of whether the sales representative was able to achieve the quota or not. Similarly, if the actual sale performance of any sales representative is found below the quota that is being assigned, immediately the management or the executives will get to know that there is something wrong, and therefore the improvement areas for improving the sale performance of that particular individual can be emphasized upon. The second objective that is often being served by quotas is that they provide you a goal or an incentive towards which the sales representatives of the sales force work towards. Now, in business, as you have in almost all other disciplines, the individuals usually perform better if they find that their activities are being monitored and they are guided by certain goals and standards. So, when you give them the quota as targets that they need to achieve, they try to put in their best of efforts to prove their efficiency and productivity, thereby acting as an incentive for the sales force to provide better or to perform in a better manner. The third objective being served through quotas is that they control salespeople activities. Now, this is something which is related to what we have already stated above. That is, that when you provide a goal to the sales representative, what you are doing, you are actually controlling a salesperson's activities. Quotas, they, in a way, students, they enable the management to direct the activities of the sales force in a controlled manner and much more effectively than would otherwise be possible for them. Like, for example, you can always, through the quotas, encourage the salespeople to focus on selling high margin items or to get orders from new customers, and by doing such kind of things you can exercise control on what kind of activities they are usually indulging in. Accordingly, what is going to happen? You are providing an evaluation or assessment of their overall productivity, because the quotas are serving as the yardstick against which you are comparing the actual performance of the salespeople, and this exercise is going to tell you the general effectiveness of the sales person. You can often also attach the compensation plans to motivate the people to their quotas. So if they meet their quotas, then they would be getting certain raise or certain hike in their salary, which acts as due motivation for them to enhance their productivity. So in a way, another objective that can be served through quotas is that they help you to improve the effectiveness of your compensation plan, because your compensation plan for every individual is going to be linked with their performance in terms of their attainment of the quotas that are being assigned. Another useful objective, learners, that we find being served through quotas is that they help the management and also the sales person to exercise control on their selling expenditure. Now, this is often stimulated by the use of expense quotas, and we'll talk about expense quotas in a while from now. So what happens is, when you assign certain quotas, you expect that the representative would also be working towards the attainment of those quotas, and therefore would be keeping their expenses under check. Okay, so the companies may therefore set certain targets with relation to the expense, and then also let the sales force know that their overall performance is going to be evaluated or would be judged as to how well they are going to meet their goal of, say, the sales volume, keeping also their expenditure under control. Another useful exercise that is being served through setting up of the quota is that overall it helps you to run certain kind of sales contests to motivate the folks. Now, the sales quotas, we find that they are generally or frequently used along with certain kinds of contests that the management runs for motivating the sales people from time to time. So the sales people, they do not have what we can call as equal opportunities. Why? Because there are normal variations that one would find in terms of differences in the territories or in terms of their workload. So if you run certain contests, what you are doing, you are providing them equal chance of winning, and that kind of the results that sales people perform with respect to the quotas that are being assigned to them within the contest, they help them to perform better and also provide them an opportunity to compete with the others, because the quota then within the government of the contest would be set more appropriately for them. Let us now understand the different types of quotas that can be put up. The first and the most frequently assigned quota is the volume quota. Now, undoubtedly, every organization is really concerned about the volume of sales that they are able to generate. So, volume quota can be determined or it can be established for either a particular geographical area or a line of product or a group of customers, even the time period, or say any combination that you want to use. Now, if you are using the volume quota for assessing the performance of the salespeople, then the smaller the marketing unit for which the goal is being established, the more effective the quota would be as a tool for exercising managerial control. Now, students, one also need to understand that while you are determining the volume quotas, the management has to take into consideration the fact and has to then decide whether or not they want the volume quotas to be established in terms of units of the product that are being sold or in terms of the money that is being generated in terms of the volumes or the rupees. Uh, but in either of the cases, the focus would be to provide good sales turnover for the enterprise as a whole. The second important quota that we generally find is being established by the enterprises is in terms of fixing the profit quotas. Now, what are the profit quotas? They can be based on your gross margin, so they can be based on your net margins. Now, you try to establish the goals on almost the same basis as you do for your volume quotas. Like you can have the gross margins being set up for a salesperson or for a territory or for a division or a department or even for a group of products. Now, some companies, they show preference for profit instead of volume quotas because this is generally considered to be a reflection of management's own recognition of the importance that they assign to profit in comparison to the volume, which is normal. Okay, then one also has to understand that this is something which is not devoid of any limitation because you are in a way trying to put a certain kind of pressure on the sales representatives and also on the management to churn out a given profit within a time period, which can be a very tedious exercise given that there could be various kind of variations that exist across the territories or across the different kind of conditions under which the sales representatives are expected to perform. The third kind of quota, students, are the expense quotas. Now, what are the expense quotas? These are the quotas that you assign for controlling the expenditure in relation to the sales. So, what you are doing here, you are trying to establish a quota or a target on how much the sales representative would be spending on his travel, on his entertainment, on his other nature of direct expenditure like food or lodging and so on and so forth. Now, why do you come up with this kind of an expense quota? Because you want to make the salesperson realize or become aware of cost and profit and to focus duly on the cost and the profit rather than only focusing on the volumes. Another kind of quota which is usually very useful is where you set up the activity quota, so the activity targets. Now, this is not only one of the ways in which you can reduce the overemphasis on the volume quotas, but also you can really focus on different kind of tasks or different kinds of activities that you want your sales representatives to perform. Like, for example, the kind of daily calls that you want them to make, or the new customers that you want them to call on, or procuring order from the new accounts, and so on and so forth. So, what is happening? You are keeping a check on each and every activity, and you are trying to stimulate the salespeople to improve their performance or enhance their efforts in relation to certain kind of activities which will make their overall selling job more effective. Also, there could be certain cases where the representative may not be working on the attainment of the selling goal, but would be engaged in different kind of missionary selling activities. So when you are having activity quotas, you can balance your focus on the selling activities as well as the missionary sales. Now, though students, we find that there exist these kind of quotas that are generally assigned, but the management, if they do not want to emphasize on any particular kind of quota, then they can also assign combination quotas to the sales representatives. Like for example, they can have a volume quota attached along with the expense quota, and so on and so forth. So what is going to happen in case of combination quota? You are going to merge or collaborate the strong points of different individual types of quotas, but one again has to take into consideration the fact that while you are combining two or three quotas, one has to see that you are not making the entire exercise too complex in nature, because if you keep on adding two or many different kinds of quota plans, then the overall attainment of the goals would become very difficult and challenging for the sales representatives. Now students, after having understood the kinds of the quotas that one can have, let us proceed towards uh, having an understanding of the procedure, how the quotas are usually set. Now, when I'm talking about the procedure, I am normally talking about the procedure which is going to be established or which is going to be followed while you are setting up the volume quotas, because as I stated, these are the more preferable and popularly used quotas that are assigned. Now, what you do in case of setting up of the volume quotas, you first of all take into account or determine your territorial potential. So, quotas are set in collaboration with your territorial potential. Then, while you are fixing the quotas, you are also taking into account the company's sales forecast or the market potential estimate for a given market or for the total market. Now, the total estimates for the territories may not have been prepared. So, if you take into account the overall market potential, that would serve the purpose. And then at like towards the end, what you do, you set independent quotas for like of sales or individual quotas for different market potential that you can achieve. Now students, irrespective of what kind of quota you assign and how you go about the overall procedure of fixing the volume quotas, one has to take into consideration some basic aspects while fixing the quotas for either the territory or for the sales representative. One, your quotas, that is your targets or your goals that you assign, they should be realistic enough. They should act as a motivating force for the sales force to improve on their performance rather than creating a pressure to adhere to the goals which are unrealistic and unattainable. So if it is too much out of the reach, then the salespeople would lose any motivation or incentive or any morale, because they are then going to consider uh, the themselves as weak and inefficient in terms of realizing the goals that are being assigned to them. The objective also should be accurate. Now, as I said, one has to take into consideration the due adjustments that need to be incorporated because of the variations in territories or because of the variations in the workload, and therefore the quotas, the right kind of quotas or the accurate form of quotas, they should be attached or they should be assigned in relation to the potentials. You need executive judgment, but just relying on the judgment of the executive as to what should be the quota is not sufficient. You should also, this should not be the sole factor. You should also have faith in the performance of the people. You should also be convinced that you are setting impartial goals for them. You should also be convinced that you have made due adjustments in the objectives or in the targets being set, taking into account the variation and certain uncontrollable factors under which the salespeople are expected to perform, or under which the territories they operate. Uh, Another characteristics or another guideline while you are fixing the quotas for the sales representative is that they should be very easy to understand and administer. A quota, unless and until it is clearly comprehensible, you cannot expect the sales force to work on the attainment of the same. So if you are making a very complicated quota by combining certain different kind of targets, and this is a very complex kind of plan that you present to the sales force, then they are going to not appreciate it. They are going to be really suspicious about the whole activity. From the management point of view also, the system of or the overall procedure of setting the quota should be very economical and very easy to administer in the enterprise. The quota should also be flexible in the sense that you should be able to stretch them. If the quota period is very long, you have assigned an annual quota for the person or for a given territory, then there should be some way or mechanisms through which a flexibility component is introduced. Why? Because the period is long enough and one can usually expect some changes to take place in the market conditions. At the same time, the flexibility, if you duly incorporate in your plans, there would be less confusion, and the sales representatives, they can work with ease towards the system which is flexible and takes into account the fact that the circumstances are changing, and therefore the quota is also aligning itself to those circumstances and is causing less confusion and less complexity at the end of the sales force to implement or adhere to them. The quota should always be fair. So the fairness component is something which goes without saying. So a good quota plan should always be fair to everybody that is involved in the whole exercise. The workload that you impose on a salesperson as a part of the quota plan, it should be same for the representatives who are working at the same level in the organization. This actually doesn't mean that you have to assign equal quotas for everybody, but then you have to duly take into consideration their potential, which may differ, the difference in the competitive environment that they are exposed to, their abilities to perform their job, and because not two individuals are alike in all these respects, therefore one should be fair in what kind of objectives you are setting up for them. Now, students, after having a deliberation on all these things, it seems that the quotas are necessary and the quotas should always be assigned in an organization. Here, I would like to, for the sake of understanding, would also like to draw your attention on the fact that it is not always good to have or to use quotas in an organization. Though the quotas help you in different ways, and we have seen the kind of objectives that the quotas serve, but then in there are reasons for not using quotas. There are valid grounds for not using the quotas also. Like the one reason could be that it is generally difficult to estimate sales quotas, especially in case of industrial good companies. Also, we find that if at all you have quotas in place, your sales quotas in place, they are usually based on some sort of a subjective judgment rather than any objective evaluation of the circumstances. We also find that in case of industrial units, in case of industrial enterprises, they not actually prefer to set the quotas rather than accepting the quotas which are based on guesswork or which are based on estimates. It is always better not to have a quota in the first place. Also, we find that the quotas that are fixed, that are based on the ability of the salesperson, or that are based on the potential of the geographical territories, or which are assigned keeping in consideration the competitive activities or the competitor's position in the marketplace. If they are wrongly estimated, then the quotas are not realistic. And if they are overestimated, if they are not set after taking into account all these factors, you are unnecessarily putting the salespeople to a lot of pressure of attaining those quotas which are underestimated or which are overestimated sometimes, or which are unrealistic in any way. And you are linking their incentives, you are linking their compensation to the attainment of those quotas or to attainment of those goals, which is not right. So it's a, you cannot expect a person, and you should not reasonably expect the salespeople to be working towards the attainment of those goals which are based only on estimates. Rather than doing that, if you have certain other ways and mechanisms to motivate the salespeople to perform to the best of their abilities, rather than putting them under this kind of pressure to meet their quotas, probably you can have a more flexible system and a more conducive work environment in the enterprise, where each and every sales representative would be from within feel motivated to work towards certain goals and churn out a certain expected level of sales for the furtherance of overall organizational goals. So students, at the end of this session, I'm sure you would have gained an understanding of what are sales quotas, what are the different types of quotas that are being assigned for the territories and for the sales representatives, and how quotas serve certain important objectives and utilities for the management. But again, it is not always right to strictly go by the quotas. There are reasons and there are grounds where you can always go without the quotas, or in place have quotas which are flexible and which are based on some objective parameters that take into consideration the differences in the potentials of the people as well as differences in the market conditions. Thank you so much for attending this session. Take very good care of yourself, stay safe and stay protected.